vocational training centers that prepare students coming in from vulnerable communities and backgrounds for a career in hospitality and catering. And then someone who needs very little introduction, Lola Akinmaid-Akkerstrom, award-winning visual storyteller, author and entrepreneur, joins us. Her work has been featured in numerous publications and platforms like National Geographic, New York Times, The Guardian, BBC, CNN, Travel, and many more. And as a business owner and entrepreneur, she runs Stockholm-based travel agency Geo Traveler Media, co-founded the traveler influencing marketing collective Nordic TV, and recently co-founded Local Purse that we'll hear a bit more about today. And then last but certainly not least, Casey Hanisco, president of ATA. Casey manages the strategic direction and dynamic team delivering an ecosystem of events and business solutions for destinations and adventure travel brands around the world. So Casey, we're going to jump straight in, and I'm going to start with you, if you don't mind. What are some of the key observations that you have made over the past year, and how has that impacted on your business or role in travel and tourism? Is Casey with us?
I think Casey is joining.
There we go.
Casey just needs to accept the invitation to join the stage. So Casey, I'll just resend the invitation and then you should be able to join. If maybe we could move on to the next question shortly and then return to
Casey, we'll come back to you in a minute when you're ready for us. So Anisha, I want to pop over to you. It's a bit more of a personal question, I guess. You know, as women, all of us, we've really had to navigate this pandemic in our own unique ways, and it's taken us, you know, it's probably taken a toll on all of us, you know, certainly made me a little bit grayer and more wrinkly, but I guess wiser in the long run. How do you navigate the pandemic in a practical way? Were there moments of despair, and what helped you to find your way through it?
Sure. No, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And I think, you know, the pandemic for all of us has been quite difficult. But mainly for me is trying to stay as much as positive and being a lot more mindful in terms of myself and do more for I don't get burnt out. I think that's one of the things throughout the pandemic, how much we do constantly. And one of the practical examples of adapting to it is online. So in terms of my services, I moved everything on so flexible, and also because, you know, fortunately there is furlough here. I was fortunate to keep kind of from home, but a lot of the kids that I work with didn't have that privilege and benefit. So these online experiences that I started to directly provide financial support to them, and which was something that I think they needed, because some of the time we want to support them long term, but at a time of the pandemic, we support right now, majority of the time is financial. You know, I was very lucky to get a lot of corporate support and a lot of people wanted to be that way to benefit and to listen to our stories.
It is absolutely true. It has truly been a moment of reflection, but you know, in that time as well, to be able to gear ourselves up to be of help to other women that are much more vulnerable potentially than we even are. So there are so many social issues and trauma that have been brought to the surface during this time of COVID. And how do you think can we use this as an opportunity to bring about more positive change without causing more hurt? And what role in particular do you think women can play in that process?
Sorry, there's a little bit of this like that. think, you know, you're right. There is a lot of trauma and there is a lot of hurt within the community, a lot of things that we've navigated through as women, and to community. And I think for me, trying to so that we celebrate joy in our life, we celebrate and empowering those around me and empowering work in my company and kind of sharing skills, sharing my resources so that they can have the same. The biggest thing I want to take away from the pandemic, but others, but also to rally women, non-binary and trans women to kind of unite a little bit more, because we can definitely do far more to. You know, there's this saying that if you empower, for example, a Black woman, you. That's absolutely true. One of the things I do, if you know, everything related, it does it does support women, especially because women still coming out at night with us. And again, that I feel that we should be working towards it all.
That's absolutely true, Aisha. And I personally have realized the importance of communicating more and to be absolutely more show our vulnerability. You know, so many people would look at someone like myself or some of you and go, but you know, she's got it all sorted out. You know, she's a woman in leadership and she's been around the block. But you know, this pandemic has given us all a major knock. And to be able to talk about that and talk from a place of vulnerability and honesty, you know, and it kind of, this thing has leveled the playing field. I mean, we've all been affected, not just small businesses, not just entrepreneurs. All of us have been affected. And I think we all have a very powerful role to play to bring the message down to earth and just unpack it in a practical way for the women around us. So, you know, Casey, thank you so much for joining us. It's great to see you here with us today. What are some of the key observations that you have made over the past year, and how has that impacted your particular role and your business in travel and tourism?
Thanks, Mariette. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, great. Okay. That's it. Well, it really relates to what you were just talking about vulnerability. I mean, as leaders in the industry and keeping an eye on the industry, it has been incredibly important to always be aware that the wellness of people is of utmost importance when we're thinking about our teams, we're thinking about the team's families, we're thinking about the industry overall. You know, knowing that you're coming from a position of everyone's in emotional crisis in some way. It's not just a health crisis, there's an emotional crisis too. So what we've really seen from an industry perspective is that obviously business is down. So businesses are needing to furlough team or lay off team or hibernate their businesses, or leaders of businesses are needing to choose to do something else or even sell their business. And so all of that is happening and dynamic and changing. And so the ATTA has really made a choice to create a lot of environments where we're creating that space for community that's so necessary, for that coming together, for that listening, for the opportunity for people to share. And I think as women leaders, we're so well positioned, maybe in an unfortunate way, to know how to tap into our emotional ability to connect with people and yet still persevere and move on and make those financial, you know, think about finances and think about what we need to do to innovate and change. And so I think that, and I say that's unfortunate because I think that women have sort of had to bear the brunt of being emotionally strong in times when others are maybe can be sort of they're supporting others. We support others a lot, and I think we've had a lot of supporting to do over the last year. But I also think that is uniquely positions us to be successful right now. So me personally, it's been a lot of emotional support to the team, really having a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, and uniquely needing to actually execute on those things and be ready to know that we don't know what's going to happen right now. So it's been pretty critical to be flexible at this time.
And Katie, do you think that skill set that, or I guess intuition that women tend to have to be a little bit more sensitive and emotionally in tune with the people around us is an asset that can be utilized going forward? How would you make that kind of a permanent part of a solutions-driven organization or with people at the heart of it? Do you think it is, do you think it's just a temporary thing that we've had to do, or do you think women can play a major role going forward in solution solving and crisis management because of the skill set that we have?
I definitely think so. I think it's critical for us to be leading with our heart and our bodies, and listening to what that means, and to rethink what having a positive impact means and bring our own view to that. So instead of it being seen from a conquering perspective, an achieving perspective, a really what does it mean to personal health, to the planet's health? Like listen to that. And as women leaders, make decisions and have community around really talking about what that means. And I really do think that that's going to stay. And I think the climate crisis has made that incredibly important. And I think in the industry, we know that. I think we've had time over the last year to listen to that. People are in the business, with business being down, people are taking the time to think about how their business affects the climate, and also with diversity. And I think that people are recognizing that more diverse communities and bringing more voices to the table and people to the business decisions and to teams is really something that is going to be and is necessary for a sort of long-term health.
100%. And I think we really need to find practical ways in which we can help amplify the stories of women to enable continued innovation. And I know we've got a couple of really great storytellers here in the room with us today. And Joanna, I want to get to you. There's been a lot of talk. Thank you so much, Casey. There's been much talk about building back better. In the industry, as in tourism, we're really good at throwing these terms around and sounding really clever and switched on or woke. And but this one term, apart from the other terrible one, which is let's all pivot our business. I think we're all quite sick and tired of hearing about pivoting. I think enough pivoting. The other term is this term of building back better. And I think in principle, it's really important, but what does it really mean? I mean, could you share some examples from your experience where women are driving change and using this crisis to bring about not just a temporary shift, but a permanent shift or a new narrative?
Sure, thank you for the question. I think we all know that before COVID hit, that tourism was growing at an accelerated rate that was almost out of control. And our industry was causing harm to people, to the planet. And part of that was happening because of some of the destructive narratives that we had built up in this industry. The narrative in tourism was largely shaped by and centered around white, wealthy, able-bodied people, particularly men. And so what that meant is that a lot of the stories that we heard were leaving important and pivotal voices out. And when we don't hear the whole story, we don't create the conditions for meaningful, truly meaningful travel experiences. And I think when we look at building back better, one of the key things that we can do at this point is really disrupt that narrative and bring a new way of telling the story of the travel experience into the next wave of the tourism industry. And one of the ways that we can do that is using storytelling to help support sustainable development in the destinations where we work. It includes amplifying and elevating marginalized and silenced stories from the past. It includes bringing forth and surfacing stories that offer historical and cultural context that has been buried and erased and silenced. It means centering local people and local communities over the comfort of travelers sometimes. And so to your question about, what does that look like in practice? Certainly one of the things that we need to do is understand what the dominant narrative has been up to this point. And we need to look for those other stories that have been silenced and kind of pushed into the dark corners of the places that we're working. We really need to be seeking out and elevating, amplifying those people and social initiatives and projects and local businesses that are being run by women and other marginalized populations. And then we also need to be thinking about how we not only tell that story from the industry side, but we need to be helping content creators and travelers themselves tell a better, more responsible, more intentional story. And so that requires, for example, looking at the content creators, the influencers, the travel writers we work with, and diversifying our content creator pools. It means, really thinking about, to Casey's point about being mindful about the planet, it means rethinking the way that we're just giving out swag. It means being mindful about the way that we're positioning experiences and the photography that we're using with that kind of story, and making sure that what we are putting out in the world as a story is actually being interpreted in a way that will attract the right traveler, that will set up the correct expectations for travelers that are visiting a destination, and that ensure that those people living in these places that people visit are being respected and treated like the residents in their own home. Because we all need to remember that travelers are visitors in somebody else's backyard. And when we think about the new narrative that we want to put out in the world in regard to tourism, it needs to be a story that centers local people first, that supports and amplifies and protects marginalized people, women, and other people who have been silenced in the past. It's really time that we change that narrative, and this is our opportunity to do that as we do Build Back Better.
It's a great time to do that. We have a great excuse now. So I think we could be a majorly missed opportunity if we don't disrupt that traditional model of tourism or the traditional story. And you're absolutely right. It's become such a cliche, that story, and we have a duty to change it. And so if you could sketch to us, you are a great advocate for disrupting and a great storyteller yourself, but if you could sketch this ideal or more sustainable tourism model, what would it look like, and what would be the role of women in this example? I think very importantly, you made the point of we need to start creating tourism experiences more with communities in mind than just travelers. And we know that happy local communities make for happy travelers as well. So it's kind of a win-win. But how does a model like that look practically?
Well, I think one of the things that has been prevalent to this point is almost this idea that tourism is working in a silo next to the communities that are living in a destination. And we need to recognize that there is so much powerful change and development and creation happening in these destinations. And so tourism has the potential to support people and initiatives and businesses that already exist on the ground. We don't need to create anything new. What we can do is use tourism as a really powerful tool to support what already exists. Now, some of these initiatives all are related to tourism, and just to give you some example of female run and oriented kinds of initiatives that are really powerful. Clean Up Kayak is run by a woman in Sydney, and this is an initiative where people can take a kayaking trip where they're also cleaning garbage out of the water while they are paddling. This is the kind of initiative that you can have a fantastic travel experience and also be supporting sustainable development and care for the planet during your experience. Green Fashion Tours in Berlin is run by several fantastic women. This initiative is helping people understand the circular economy related to fashion and the clothes that we are wearing. Shiro's Hangout in India is supporting women who were victims of acid attacks. This is not necessarily a tourism initiative, but certainly if you were to dine at this cafe, you're supporting women. And we know that women are investing about 90% of their incomes back into their communities and families. So in comparison to about 30% for men. So if we are intentionally looking for these kinds of initiatives and programs and projects and change makers in the communities where we work, we are not only providing our travelers with a spectacular local experience, which more and more travelers say they want, but we are also creating a better story and supporting the communities where we work. It truly is a win-win-win for the communities, for the travelers, and for the tourism industry at large.
100%. And I know here in South Africa, we have an incredible all-female, all-Black female anti-poaching unit called the Black Mambas. And if you haven't heard their story, go and Google it. But they also welcome visitors to spend a day with them out in the bush. And so that's a wonderful example of women making a positive change, but also allowing visitors to share in that. So that's a great local example from here. Sophie, over to you. Thank you so much, Joanna. I know there's lots of great comments as well, very powerful statements made. Appreciate that. Your members, Sophie, distinguish themselves by their unwavering commitment to sustainability. Can you elaborate to explain how this helps to break the cycle of poverty in communities and what had to change because of COVID?
Thank you very much for the question. So as mentioned during the introduction, Asset Agency is a regional network of vocational training centers, and currently it gathers 12 schools across Cambodia, Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam. And one of the things that indeed makes our members stand out is the way how they address the so-called 3 Ps of sustainability: people, planet, and profit. So on the people side, they are actually supporting students coming from a vulnerable background to break the cycle of poverty by providing them a training which is tailored to the needs of the market and which also has a very high focus on life skills. And in this way, our members can address a specific need of disadvantaged youth, especially female students who represent around 55% of the cohort. When it comes to the planet, they also integrate in their practices a green approach. And this actually has been evidenced in our eco-guide for hospitality businesses and schools. They also raise student awareness on environmental challenges. And finally, when it comes to profit, they all operate an income-generating business, such as a hotel, a restaurant, a cafe, or a bakery shop. And this allows students to practice their skills in real-life setting, but also allows the school to generate some funds that are then reinvested into the training. And the training is obviously offered totally for free to students who could otherwise not afford an education.
That's really powerful. So there are many examples of stories and individuals and communities that have overcome great adversity through this model of leaving no one behind. And I absolutely love that. I love that, we are building not for ourselves, but for the women and for the vulnerable people behind us. And it's a very important concept. So could you please, I know you started to touch on this, but could you share some examples of how the challenges that came with COVID were tackled within your network, and whether any positive or new opportunities presented itself that can now become part of your model going forward?
Sure. So in March 2020, so when the first lockdown was declared in Asia, the first concern was obviously to make sure that everyone was safe. But very quickly, our members had to address a series of key questions. The first was, how do we continue training our students and mitigate dropout risk? Another question was, how do we find sustainable employment for graduates, but also for alumni who may have lost their job as a result of the pandemic? And a third question was, how do we sustain ourselves? So our members actually have been demonstrating incredible creativity and resilience in dealing with these questions. And personally, I really feel privileged to have had the chance to observe the work that they all have been doing to continue fulfilling their social mission and to address these questions. So with reference to training continuity, in the countries where our members operate, schools have been closed for, let's say, 3 to 9 months, according to the country. And during those months, teams have been exceptionally mobilized to make sure that students could continue their training. Most schools have developed distance learning systems, usually from scratch and with means that were at hand. They also provide students with equipment, such as, for example, USB modems or data credit to make sure that they could join such distance learning. Then, with reference to the professional integration, schools actually have to deal with two main issues. The first one is obviously the decreasing demand for labor in the industry. The second is the fact that actually tourism and hospitality jobs are changing. So in order to address the first issue, members have been providing enhanced professional support to students. They also did much closer follow-up on fresh graduates, and again, in some cases, also on alumni who may be out of job. They also have expanded and diversified their networks of partners. So, for example, they could hire focus on restaurants, including those serving the local market. They also started targeting companies where the hospitality skills of students would be transferable. And I'm thinking about canteens, hospitals, the retail sector, or even real estate agencies. And then to adjust to the changing expectations in terms of skills, actually some consultation initiative with the industry have been launched, and findings indicate that employers are more and more looking for staff who are comfortable with technology, flexible, able to multitask, and also able to constantly learn. This actually reconfirms the relevance of the focus that our members put on life skills. But at the same time, schools also have been adjusting the curriculum. For example, they added extra hygiene classes, extra IT courses. Some of them even implemented entrepreneurship modules to support students who would consider at some point to launch their own business. And finally, with reference to the third question, the one of financial sustainability, members have been actually adjusting the strategy of their social business. They now have new commercial targets, especially within the domestic market. They also launch new products and services like, lunch boxes, like catering services, delivery services. And some of them also have established partnerships with like-minded companies in order to offer their products to a wider market.
That's excellent, and it really shows, the innovation that sits at the core of the tourism sector. We've always been a vulnerable industry, haven't we? If it isn't a political crisis or a social, economic crisis or a volcano or some other natural disaster, the industry has always relied upon this ability to build back and to innovate and to be flexible and adaptable. So I think one of the most adaptable people that I've met and that have really shown herself to be able to use an opportunity well is Lola. Lola, I love your new business idea born out of COVID, and as you said, it was kind of using this macro trend that was evolving to kind of Robin Hood it for the tourism sector, and that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be looking around us, and I think a lot of the time, other sectors can learn from tourism, in terms of our adaptability. Can you tell us a little bit about this new venture, Local Purse, and how it could help build a better and I guess a more sustainable backbone for this vulnerable sector?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me. So obviously, when the pandemic hit, it actually showed the travel industry all its blind spots, right? So, for example, we're still one of the only few industries that we have to be there physically to actually operate. And so, when we look at other industries like, the future of work, moving into remote conferencing, the future of retail, moving into kind of live video shopping, those are some of the trends that have started slowly slipping into the. And so, Local Purse came from kind of me looking at one of those trends, which is live video shopping. And this trend has been huge in Asia for a while. It's making its way in Europe. And it's actually been around for a long time when you think of QVC and like the home shopping network. But what we're trying to do is to bring it to help kind of build a backbone for the travel industry, because the most impacted people were the travel guides, as well as the kind of local artisans and vendors on the ground who rely on tourism. And most of them are usually women. They're the ones that create things with their hands. They're the ones that preserve traditions. They're usually the gatekeepers of culture. And so we wanted to see, okay, how can we bring this to start helping, not just creating virtual experiences, but creating virtual experiences where you can also get something back. And getting something back is usually what creates that connection to a place. When we travel somewhere, when we buy something that's locally made, when we support a local community, or when we even bring pictures back, that's usually kind of what creates a bit of connection. And then with the platform, also seeing who you're visiting, who the money is going to directly, and then also not being quote unquote a charity, but actually people do want to just get back to work and show the things that they are proud of, that they build with their hands. And so Local Purse, we're just about 5 months old now, but we've already built this platform up and we've already onboarded 4 destinations, and I have a global partner as well in Intrepid. And so we're kind of slowly trying to create this, because even when travel opens back up again, right, this is the future of travel. We need to start doing some things that can be done virtually into a more virtual space.
Absolutely. It speaks very much to what we in marketing, use the term of a customer journey, right? And this enabling us to extend that destination connection, and to introduce travelers earlier on, even to the very people in the community, that so often we miss because we have to rely on traditional itineraries or tour operators, and we miss the real gems. We miss the beauty often that lies hidden for so many travelers. So I think that ability to be able to intersect and decide and kind of explore a destination virtually, make your selection, engage with a destination virtually, yes, then physically go and visit if possible, but then for years after to stay connected and to revisit those friends that you've made. I for one, the memories that we have of travel, that the people are always the things that we remember, are always the things that change our hearts forever. And I think this is an incredible example of a model that can truly help the very vulnerable small businesses and female entrepreneurs. What are some of your favorite examples, Lola, where you can already see positive change happening through Local Purse? I know it's early days and we're all excited to see the journey unfold, but I'm sure there's already some positive change happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've already started onboarding destinations like Lagos, Nigeria, right? Which is a destination that many people may not have high on their list to travel to, and that's my own country. We're already working with Toleb. So NADA, we're already beginning to start onboarding some experiences in Lebanon. And then even with Marrakesh, you know, when we had some some special events, in an hour, you know, some of those artisans sold more in just 1 hour than they had sold the entire pandemic when it just kind of started. And so the impact is immediate. And when we even had our experience in Costa Rica, even though that was a small group of people, half of the people bought stuff and supported the entrepreneurs. And they were, you know, all women actually. So women, local artisans, you know, that work on the coffee farm, as well as running kind of marketplaces that spotlight Costa Rican artisans called Local Keeps. So just we know the impact is immediate, you know, and also even just with the statistics and all the research we're doing, people are 4 times more likely to make a purchase when they see the person they are talking to, when they listen to them. It's all, you know, it's already kind of market validated. So we know that. And so what we're trying to do is move faster, you know, because there are so many people that can already start, you know, benefiting from this platform. And as small as our startup is, we address 6 of the UN sustainability goals. You know, we're trying to create equity, you know, gender equality, build more sustainable communities, and, you know, with innovation as well. So there is just so many positives that this can bring. And with anything that's new, there's always going to be resistance. Anything that's disruptive, there's always going to be resistance in the early stages. But that's where we come in with education and putting in the work right now to start showing people that this is something that's really going to help the travel industry in the long run.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Lola. And I think one of our greatest responsibilities as women is to support initiatives by fellow female entrepreneurs like this. You know, it's one thing to applaud from a distance. It's a very different thing to actually put our money where our mouths are and to participate. So I really want to encourage our audience to go and check out Local Purse, hop onto one of the next tours and shop. You know, one of the things that this pandemic has taught us is that online shopping is okay. It's not, you know, we're not going to lose our personal details or someone's going to clone our credit cards. You know, it's actually okay. And, you know, we've seen the rise in the small entrepreneur who's been supported practically now during this time by all of us, shopping at our local grocer, shopping online for, you know, whether it's natural skincare or jewelry or whatever else. So I think this is a great example of where you are piggybacking on a major global trend and kind of taking it for tourism. And I think there are other examples like this, and we really have to explore with great creativity and curiosity what else we can do as the tourism sector. These trends that are evolving, whether that be in sustainability, whether that be in the way in which social media is evolving and influencer marketing is evolving. We really have to be on top of our game here and not wait to be led, but we need to lead. So, so kudos to you, Lola. Everybody, thank you so much. I know there are some questions coming in. I want to now just invite the audience again to pop your questions onto the Q&A board. In the meantime, we will start wrapping up a little bit. I've got a question here for Lola. How do you connect local artisans to sell if they do not have internet communication channels? A nice practical question there for you, Lola. Great question.
Absolutely. And that's one of the challenges, but that's also a misconception as well, because most of the world, many people are on their mobile, right? So they may not have a laptop, but at least they usually have a phone with at least a 3G connection or 4G connection. And most of those experiences are done from the host side through their mobile. So I think that's a big issue, obviously, because of internet connection, but it's a lot less than we think about. You know, it's we're a lot more connected that way through mobile technology. I think the bigger issue is getting people that are used to collecting cash in person to start thinking about your cash is coming next week or in 2 weeks, you know, through a more digital, you know. So there's a lot of, you know, pain points, things that we're addressing, we're working on. But once we can kind of solve all those challenges, then it's going to just make it even easier for them to kind of onboard really smaller. And that is also how we're going to market, is also by making sure we're going with already vetted vendors, right? So artisans are already used to maybe shipping things abroad. We start with those first, we get those on board. Then they can also be the interface to smaller artisans that can kind of, you can kind of start building collective that way. Where if the shop already knows what to do, then all the smaller ones can come through that one shop. So for example, in Costa Rica, that's what kind of Local Keeps does. You know, they are the interface to all the smaller artisans that can do it themselves. So there are many different things we're thinking about, but yes, that's definitely on our plate.
Yeah, so I think of, you know, remaining practical, you know, and not just developmental. So often we focus so much on development and training that we don't put in place smart solutions or practical solutions. And, you know, it's that combination. We have to be commercially minded. We have to ultimately look at, this has got to bring some cash into someone's bank account so that that can flow down into. Aisha, I've got a question for you. Thank you, Lola. Aisha, what risks have you faced as a social entrepreneur in terms of kind of market or customer resistance, tech, financial, etc.? Can you just expand on that a little bit for us? Thank you for the question. Just unmute yourself. Thanks. While Aisha just sorts out her microphone, there's another question is, what do you find are the common barriers to making community-based and sustainable tourism happen? And how do you overcome these? Joanna, can I ask you to answer that one, please?
Yeah, sure. So I think there are a couple things that stand in the way here. One of them is just simply the fact that the way that we've maybe done business in the past hasn't been this way. And so it's easy to fall back on old habits and what is easy and what is comfortable. And when it comes to making change in this way, the ultimate goal is that sustainability and responsibility and community focus is the default, you know, done with intention, so that when travelers are traveling, they have no choice but to have an experience that is considered sustainable and responsible. All that said, part of the way that we get to that place is that, you know, we really need to be working with all of our partners on the ground, and partnerships take time. Having these conversations and developing these relationships takes time. So for example, in the accommodations that your travelers might be staying in, you know, the default thing, the default action might be to use those little plastic bottles of shampoo that are in the bathroom, or the bottle of water that's in your room. But when we simply remove those kinds of things from the space, travelers don't ask for them. They don't go looking for them. If there's just a pitcher of water on the table versus a whole bunch of water bottles, they'll just use water out of the pitcher, right? So this requires working with our partners on the ground, thinking about the whole supply chain, and developing those relationships so that sustainability and responsibility are the default with intention. So I would say that is one of the big barriers. And like anything, it takes time. It's not easy. It's easy to fall back on what we know. But if we are intentional and that's what we want to do, then we need to put in the time and effort to get to that place.
100%. Aisha, are you ready for us to answer that question? I'll just repeat the question.
Yeah, I think so.
What risks have you faced as a social entrepreneur? in terms of market, customer resistance, tech, or financial?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I think for me, because the market is quite new, predominantly the LGBT community, which is dominated by gay white men. So it's very difficult to break through that market. To be as a queer woman, to kind of access to other women. And I think one of the challenges I face with customers is because I'm kind of this gateway and opening to the queer community. It's just being mindful of the people that come and people that could not be that we want within our space. But I must say, any particular risk in terms of that, been positive. I would say about 60% of the people that come through us are straight, older, and women. Also, those who book the experiences that I do by accident, it realization of understanding the community, of feeling a lot safer, and just kind of checking themselves and going, hey, you know, this is what I used to think, and this is actually the reality. So it has that power to. I know, you know, as a social entrepreneur, it is very difficult to make money because how you go back into the community, it feeds in venues to creatives and artists that are often marginalized. But I must say it has been surprising how much is needed, but also how much is well received.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Now, I've just got last two questions for Sophie and Casey before we wrap up and hand back to our chair. Sophie, you know, you've been through a lot. You have illustrated in a very practical way to us how your community has navigated this crisis. What is next? What is in the pipeline for you that you are working on and excited about?
Well, I think that the silver lining of the crisis is obviously the greater concern for sustainability. And we hope that such concern will actually guide the recovery process. And as I mentioned previously, sustainability relies at the very core of the model of our members. So when everyone is talking about building back better and leaving no one behind, actually what our members are doing is getting more and more attention. So as a network, we are doing our utmost to make sure that their example can inspire others. And to do that, we work very hard to enhance their visibility and also to consolidate the lessons that were learned during the crisis.
Wonderful. And we wish you great success with the next chapter. Casey, finally, in closing, how, in your opinion, can we build on these positive outcomes to ensure that the industry continues to thrive with all women and all individuals at its core?
That's a great question. I think from my recent experience, I think what has been surprising to me is women's need to be welcomed into sharing their story. And so I think every person attending this conference really needs to make an effort to ask for those stories and to share them, because I think we think that it's so easy and that those stories easily come out and are put out there, and they're not. So every inspiring story that we hear today, I think, should be shared. And I also think that there needs to be a lot of effort for all of us individually to really understand the stories of our own local communities, because I think that that's going to help the global travel industry overall to really deepen our own understanding of the people around us, the unique cultures around us, and welcoming them in, sharing those stories, in particular women's stories around us, and then sharing those out to the world. And I think that that's going to amplify and build and make the industry better in the long term.
100%. And I think a forum like the International Women in Travel and Tourism Forum and what is being done through this is such a valuable platform to tell these stories and to elevate the causes that we are all kind of trying to chip away at. So I'm very grateful to each one of you for joining us. Back to the chair, and I thank you very much for joining us. Any last words from any one of you before we hand back?
Just want to say thank you so much. And then just real quick, in terms of over-tourism comes over-consumption, and this is an opportunity for artisans to start realizing, instead of us mass-producing, we can start focusing on real things, traditional things that uplift our culture. So that's just one thing I wanted to say as well.
Thank you, Lola. That's a good ending. Anybody else, Casey?
Just thank you so much. It's an inspiring group of women.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to reconnecting in person one of these days. I think we are all craving human touch and in person, but in the meantime, we might all have to join for a tour at local person, do some shopping together online. Right, Lola?
Yes, welcome. Thank you all so much.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you so much.